Hey crafters, thanks for joining me. In this tutorial, I'll be showing how to make an easy yet effective card with mixed media techniques. I'll be combining my distress products with some products from Lavinia Stamps. Hope you enjoy! So the first thing I'm going to do is use a piece of paper that is the same size as my stencil. Now this is a stencil from Lavinia Stamps called Stone, and it's quite large. It's about 8 by 6 inches in size. And I'm using the Distress texture paste, and I'm just putting it in 4 random areas on the card front. And then I'm scraping off the excess with my spatula and putting it back in the container. Now the great thing about having a work surface like this art station is that you can keep your mess contained, and it takes a good half an hour for your distress paste, texture paste to dry. So I like to store any wet mediums like this on my art station until it's completely dry. So now that this is completely dry, I'm going to trim it so it's 5 inches by 7 inches, which will be my finished card size. You can change this size if you prefer. So now I'm going to start adding some distress inks. And when you're using distress inks on top of a raised area like this texture paste, it's a lot easier if you use these makeup style brushes. So the brushes I'm using are from Picket Fence Studios. They're the life-changing brushes. But I know that there are lots of other styles that you can buy that have a similar effect. Now for the main area in the middle, I'm going to switch back to my regular distress blending foam because this is a lot easier to apply ink to a large area. And then I'll swap back again to the Picket Fence brush to continue adding my ink. Now after the antique linen, I'm going to add in some Rustic Wilderness, which is that beautiful new green that was added a couple months ago. And it goes so well with this antique linen, as you'll see here. You can also start to see the pattern from the stencil really shine on the card here. Now once I'm happy with the Rustic Wilderness, I'm going to add one more color around the outside of the card, which will tie in our color theme. So I'm going to add some Vintage Photo Distress ink, and I'm going to blend this around the entire outside of the card. Now when I'm blending distress ink, I like to put my ink down first and then go back over the areas to blend them out. So I'm going to continue adding the Vintage Photo around the outside before I blend it in. Now when you're working over areas with texture paste, just be a bit more mindful of them and try not to be too aggressive with your blending. And of course, make sure that the texture paste is completely dry before adding any inks. So I'm just going to continue blending until I'm happy with that, going back and forth between the colors until I have a nice gradient effect, so that my panel is lighter in the middle and darker on the outside. Now the distress inks work really well with water, so I'm going to use some water on top, which will help to soften the blending and also create this really amazing effect. Now, as there is texture paste on here, you'll notice that the ink has lifted off of some of the areas where I've applied texture paste, and this really helps to create that mixed media effect. So after making sure this is completely dry with my heat tool, I'm going to start adding some stamps. Now the first stamp I'm using is called Mini Flutter, and it's a beautiful little butterfly from Lavinia Stamps, which is very intricate and has lots of great detail. And I'm just going to stamp this in a random pattern around my background. And I'm using this really dark black called Nocturne from VersaFine Clair, and this helps the ink to really stand out on the colored background. Now this ink is actually oil-based, so it won't be affected by the water on my card base, but you still need to make sure that your back panel is completely dry before adding any stamped images. So now you could leave your images as they are now, but I'm going to show you how to add some more color and a sparkly effect to them. So the first thing I'm going to do is just apply some water to the stamped images, and this will help to remove the distress ink which is behind all the butterflies, which will just brighten them up very slightly. Now you don't have to do this, but I find that if you're going to add another color on top of the butterflies, it will show up more if you remove the color behind them first. So once I've added some water to each butterfly, I'm just going to remove it with a paper towel. Now to add some color to my butterflies, I'm going to use some of this Cosmic Shimmer Pixie Powder. This is a type of mica powder that you can mix with water, and it creates a beautiful shimmery paint. Now there are different brands of mica powder that you can try if you don't have this one, such as the Nouveau Shimmer Powder or the Perfect Pearls Powder. And there's even a new one that's come out from Lavinia Stamps. But the Cosmic Shimmer is the one that I am using today. Now, depending on which stamp you use, you can color in the entire stamp with the pixie powder or just bits and pieces. So what I've done is I've added little bits of yellow to all the butterflies, and now I'm going in with pixie powder in the burnt orange, and then I'll add some orange highlights to my butterflies as well. So they'll look a bit like monarch butterflies when I'm finished. Now I did speed through the coloring of this a little bit so that I didn't bore you, but it is quite straightforward and it creates a beautiful effect. These colors work so well with the background. Now I thought that I needed another stamped image around the outside of the card, so I'm using one of the stamps from the Twisted Vine set. This one looks like a bunch of leaves, and I'm stamping it with the same Nocturne ink around the outside of the card. Now, when you apply the ink on top of the distressed texture paste, you will need to push a little bit harder, but it is a great effect that you get when you stamp directly onto the texture paste. It's quite effective in real life. So now that I'm finished with the stamping, I'm going to apply the card onto a piece of rose gold metallic paper, just giving it a very fine border around the outside. And I'm putting this onto a 5 by 7 inch card blank. And then on the inside of the card, I'm going to stamp a few extra butterflies with this beautiful green ink. And I wanted this card to be an all-occasion card, so I haven't added a sentiment. But of course, you could add one if you prefer. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you are inspired by these techniques. Be sure to subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. Have a crafty day!